on. So we are now recording, and so thankful for everybody being here. My name is David Naff. I'm the director of the Metropolitan Educational Research Consortium. I'm going to talk a little bit more about MERC here in just a minute. All the other presenters that are a part of the seminar are going to introduce themselves as we're coming up in the presentation. But I'm really thrilled that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation because we've been talking about MTSS and mental health for the past several years, and it's clear that we're tapped into a broader conversation across the state. So looking forward to the discussion we're going to have today. So here's what our plan is for today. Just a little bit of background about MERC. In case you're not familiar, we're a research practice partnership housed in the School of Education at VCU. We were established back in 1991. We're tied for the oldest education research practice partnership in the country with the University of Chicago. And we work with Chesterfield, Goochland, Hanover, Henrico, and Richmond Public Schools. So it's around 165,000 students, around 200 schools, around 14,000 faculty and staff. They commission studies on topics that are of interest and immediate need. And then we design and execute those studies with support from VCU faculty, staff, and students, but also K-12 school partners with expertise. So our research is never just from a research lens. We always have practitioners and policymakers that are a part of that process as well. And so this is our website, MERC, and it's linked in the resource document as well. We have tons of resources related to mental health in schools that I hope you'll check out after we've wrapped today. Here's our plan for today. There's three things that we're going to cover primarily. First, we're going to talk about this idea of preparedness to support youth mental health and what that looks like. And so there's some evidence related to rising mental health needs, but also we have some relevant data from our region about how prepared everyone feels to support the mental health needs of their students. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about MTSS and mental health, which is really kind of the central framework of what we're going to be focusing on today. And then we're going to build off of that to talk about considering ecological systems in MTSS for mental health. So kind of leaning into Bronfenbrenner's framework and seeing how that maps onto MTSS to help frame a discussion around supporting mental health through MTSS. And we have some activities that are embedded throughout, so you don't have to just listen to us the whole time. We have some resource documents that we're going to have everybody have a chance to work in, and they're going to kind of live on after this seminar, which is the point of this, is that we see these as not just we're sharing information, but this is really kind of collective expertise that's in the room. And so we're eager to collect some resources and strategies that people have related to this topic that we'll be able to share on afterwards. And we're going to jump straight into what the research says about preparedness to support youth mental health. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Kade.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kade. I'm a PhD student at VCU and a former special education teacher and former school social worker. So I'm really excited to be here in a space with so many practitioners and learn from everybody as well. So I'm going to kick things off today, really just talking about what we're seeing in research. A lot of what we'll be focusing on today is really tools for practice, but we also wanted to make sure that folks have a little bit of context for what we're seeing in research settings as well. Um, and so the first part of this is really thinking actually about the US Surgeon General's advisory and their warnings about rising youth mental health needs. And what they've indicated really is that it's shaped by a complex mix of individual, social, and structural factors. So there's really not just this single thing that we're seeing impacting youth mental health. It's complex and it's a mix of things. We're also seeing a persistent increase in self-reported youth mental health concerns over recent decades. So we will talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how things have increased, but even before that, there has really been this kind of persistent and consistent increase in mental health concerns for young people. And they've also identified some of the contributing factors. So, again, a mix of things. So, just overall general increased pressure in society and in life for young people, the influence of social media and digital environments on their well being and mental health, the experience of trauma, and also just the structural inequities that they are kind of navigating on a micro and macro level here. All right. And then the next part, is really actually that they identified how schools play a critical role here. And so, not necessarily just in providing frontline support to youth for their mental health, but also how that needs to occur alongside community partners as well. So, really looking at this as a partnership, not just everybody working in isolation, but everybody really working together. All right, and so Dr. Naff kind of talked about this a little bit. This is a systematic literature review that was also done with Dr. Williams, who's here and present, and their colleagues. And so they really looked at the youth mental health needs post-COVID and during COVID. And so they identified that the COVID-19 pandemic, which many of us know, definitely accelerated youth mental health challenges. And they also identified two areas where there was not only kind of this reduced access to school-based mental health providers while there were interruptions to school learning, but also it highlighted the key role that school-based mental health providers play. Another recommendation that came from this is that schools really need to consider the role of all personnel in mental health support. So it's not just school social workers and school counselors. Those folks, they're equipped, but it's also thinking about how teachers, school staff, and administration as well can support mental health. And so I'm going to pass it over next to Chin-Chih to talk actually a little bit more about a study that MERC did to look at the preparedness of PK-12 faculty and staff to support mental health.
Thank you, Kate. My name is Chin-Chih Chen, Associate Professor in the Department of Counseling and Special Education. And I'm going to talk about the data we have collected and share with everyone the result and how that drive our work too. So to better understand how schools are positioned to support student mental health, we conducted a regional survey of PK-12 faculty and staff with a total sample of 854 participants. And those participants, including teacher, school-based mental health professional, administrator, and other school personnel. The goal was to investigate how prepared educators and staff feel to support student mental health within their school setting. And this finding actually helped us to identify both strengths as well as potential gap in current system of support, particularly as schools continue to respond to increasing mental health needs for our youth. All right. So there are 6 dimensions of preparedness to support students' mental health, and all items being collected, they are collected on 6-point Likert scale. So the first one, school mental health knowledge, reflect the essential knowledge and educator and staff needs to know to effectively promote and address students' mental health in school setting. The second one, mental health training and confidence actually capture the extent to which educator and staff feel adequately trained and capable of responding to students' mental health needs. Multi-tier support system, or MTSS, and mental health reflect staff perception of how well the MTSS framework is understood, implemented, or viewed as beneficial for addressing students' mental health challenges. Then positive mental health culture refer to the extent to which school setting and leadership actively foster a supportive climate for addressing student mental health needs. Then supportive policy and practice reflect how well staff feel supported by their school policy, procedure, and structure. And, like when addressing their student mental health concern. Finally, responsibility and impact actually capture educators' sense of responsibility for supporting students' mental health, as well as their belief that their effort can effectively influence students' outcome. So together, these 6 dimensions actually provide us with a comprehensive understanding of how prepared school personnel feel to support their student mental health. The following slide actually showed us the result. Overall, if you look at this 6th dimension, you will get to see educator and staff report relatively strong perception of responsibility and impact, which receive the highest rating among those 6 dimensions. And if you look at the mental health knowledge, it was also rated relatively high, suggesting that many educators and staff, they recognize the importance of supporting student mental health. However, If you look at the MTSS and mental health, it was actually received the lowest rating among the 6 area. This might suggest that although MTSS is widely used as a framework, its application to mental health may not yet fully develop or consistently implemented. And this finding actually highlighted important opportunity for us to strengthen how mental health support are integrated into the MTSS structure. So more specifically, if you look at the difference across professional role and context, when you look at closely at the difference across professional role, school-based mental health provider and administrator, they reported significantly higher level of preparedness compared to teacher and other personnel, suggesting that many frontline educators, they might benefit from additional training, resource, and system level support in order to effectively address students' mental health needs. We also found that preparedness tend to be lower in school setting when they serve community with higher economic disadvantage, which says this finding overall will highlight the importance of strengthening the capacity across professional role and ensuring access to mental health support across diverse school setting. So I'm going to pass down the conversation and presentation to our MTSS team.
David, this is Kris. Would you like me to take this slide?
Please do.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Kris Herakovich-Curtis. I am one of the VTSS coaches. I have the pleasure of being here with a few of my colleagues. First, I want to apologize. My camera seems to have a personality of its own and has decided it's tired of Zoom, so you do not see my live face. So I apologize for that. But we do want to highlight some national data here. Understanding that across 50 states, they all have adopted some form of tiered systems of supports, and that's from 2023, so nice and relevant data. Also, many of you may use Panorama as one of your tools to collect data, and they suggest that approximately 74% of schools are also using MTSS. And then last but not least, about 86% of state systemic improvement plans also reference MTSS. So we know that those school improvement plans, strategic plans, things like that are so important when we're thinking about alignment and buy-in for the work. So I love that data element especially. Then when we look a little bit more specifically across Virginia, we know that the Virginia Department of Education promotes MTSS as a core model for addressing academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs. And I think many of us are here today because when we think about MTSS, traditionally we've thought about academics and behavior. And so we want to extend that a little bit so that we can think about with the social emotional needs, how that can support our mental health work. So here's a definition of MTSS. I'll just give you a minute or two to read that to yourselves. So anyone feel free to use the chat box or unmute if there's any words that strike you as being really, really important in that definition. We would love to hear from you. Data-driven approach, yes, so important. I see that a couple of times. Systematic, targeted. Oh, I love your mindset of problem solving so that we're looking at data to make good decisions. Thank you for that participation. We appreciate that. On the next slide, we wanted to highlight for everyone here that in Virginia, we call ourselves the Virginia Tiered Systems of Supports. And we kind of have this little tagline that VTSS is who we are, but MTSS is what we do. So if you travel to another state, or even we know this work is done internationally, you'll hear the terminology multi-tiered systems of support. But many of you as divisions may have someone who is a VTSS coach supporting that work. So there's just a little clarity we wanted to emphasize for you. On this slide, you have a graphic, and we want to remind you that this work is really more complex than the triangles. And again, remind you also that we may think about this work associated with academics and behavior. And this is where we want to stretch ourselves a little bit and think about that tier one. What are we doing for all students in the classroom? What are we doing to support their social emotional needs, whether it's a behavior matrix, and how can we tweak that a little bit to make sure that we are including mental health? We also want to remind everyone that when we think about tier one, that is layered throughout this triangle. So if we have a youth that we have identified that might need a little bit small group instruction, leveled up a little bit from tier one, they're still receiving that tier one support in addition to the tier two. And then tier three is when we know that someone needs a little bit more intensive support, and that tier three is defined as that one-on-one instruction. And we know that when we put our time and our effort into doing that tier one really, really well, that we can reduce the amount of resources we're using, whether it's time, people, money, things like that, on that small group or that one-on-one instruction. So it's so important for us to be conscious with our leadership teams to think about what we're doing at tier one and making sure that that's done with fidelity. All states that are doing the work for MTSS have core components that they work with to align the work. And in Virginia, we have defined these 5 here. The first one being aligned organizational structure. This is so important to making sure that we have the right people leading the team, we have the right stakeholder voices, and ensuring that they have the skill set and that professional learning to do that work well. We also know that when they have routines and procedures around the work, that's going to help them be more efficient. And last but not least, when we have that coaching system to support that structure, that to help those leaders on the team to make sure that they have the professional learning they need, and revisiting those routines and procedures as needed to do the work well is key. Also, as many of you put in the chat box, that problem solving is going to be so important, because that's where we're thinking about what data do we have? What is the system available that has the data? Is it the right data? Is it timely? And do the right people have access to the data? Because that's going to help us make those informed decisions. So that's a circular process of looking at that data to decide where we need to make improvements to do better. The third component is that tiered continuum of supports. That's where we're thinking about the evidence-based practices that we have available, and being cognizant also of remembering that we need a defined selection process for anything new that we're bringing in, but also deselection. We don't want something sitting on the shelf that we're paying a monthly subscription for that's not being used. So we always want to think about how we're integrating those practices, that we have high quality instruction available for all staff. And don't forget that process for access, making sure that we understand what each child needs and making sure that they have access to that information, but also the staff. Do the staff know all the resources that we have, and making sure that they're aware of them? We do this well in a systematic implementation. So we all know that staff turnover can be a challenge. So we want to focus on that capacity. How can we build capacity for as many people so that if someone does leave your building, they get a promotion, that you're not going to lose that knowledge? And we can help support that system again through that progress monitoring, using that data-informed decision-making. And this last one here, phased approach, can be challenging for some people because we want to fix it, right? We see something great, we want to fix it right away. But research shows us that when we work through a phased approach and starting small, that's when we can really dig in and try and do that well, get our buy-in, get stakeholder voice, and then expand that system. And of course, we can't leave off evaluation. We must think about doing this work with fidelity, and we can only do that through evaluation of our practices, making sure that we have assessments in place to continually improve our work, making sure, again, that we're communicating and disseminating that information, and that evaluation is going to help us pinpoint and identify what outcomes we need to focus on. This is a circle logic that we use, our implementation logic for MTSS. If you've attended one of our events before, I'm sure you've seen this visual. This is really so important to help us with our decision making. It doesn't just work for education, it works for everything. We think about what our outcomes are. We look at our data to help us with our decision making. It helps us identify our strengths and things and areas of need where we need to focus our attention. The practices are what are supporting those students. Again, it's so important that we have decision criteria for those practices, for the students involved in the practices, and ensuring that those are evidence-based. And then we can't forget the staff, right? We have to have systems in place to support our staff, not just our new teachers, but someone who may have been doing this work for quite some time, but they might need a little refresher. In particular, if you're thinking about how can I bring mental health into my tiered system support, what can you do to support the staff and making sure that they have the skills to do that well? So David, I think I'm going to turn the next one over to you.
Thanks, Kris. And so a lot of what we're focusing on with our partnership with VTSS is really this idea of using data for supporting decision making. And this is a slide that VTSS put together about why is it important to use data for decision making, that it places the problem in context. So data is really there to help provide context around understanding the problem. Specifically, in this case, it'd be around like what are the mental health needs in the school and how prepared are we to meet those needs through different tiers of support, identifying the problems, using the data to pinpoint those specific issues or challenges that need to be addressed, and then refining those problems so that data can help better define and refine those problems to help find some solutions, and then defining the questions that lead to the solution. So really, this is the MERC model too, of trying to make sure that we're providing local data to be able to support decision making. That data really helps us to ask those right questions. It's not really to provide the solutions, but it's to help us kind of understand what's going on and have a common language or framework for how to move forward. And really, this helps inform decision making. And this is kind of related to just this overall need that sets up this partnership that we have between MERC and VTSS, where we know, based off of some of the things that we've shared, Kade was talking about how there's rising youth mental health needs over recent decades, and those were accelerated by COVID-19. We also know from local data that there's significantly lower perceptions of MTSS as being effective for mental health support in the MERC region. So among all the different dimensions of mental health support preparedness, MTSS was consistently rated the lowest. But we also know that there's a high prevalence of MTSS across Virginia and the country. So putting all those things together, that's how we ended up forming this partnership. It makes sense to try to strengthen mental health support through MTSS to be able to have kind of the widest spread impact across the state. And potentially even across the country. And so the way that we've done this, the first step of this is we had a Breakthroughs grant from VCU that allowed us to pull together what we called the MTSS Mental Health Breakthroughs Advisory Council, which was a really pretty amazing group that we pulled together. It was school and central office representatives from across the region. We had 12 people that joined it. We met with them 7 different times over the course of a year, and we developed an MTSS mental health model. So what does this look like for our region and our specific context? And then we talked with them about fidelity assessment and the development of a pilot project that we've now launched. And just to give a little bit of background on what that is, that MTSS mental health pilot project, we're now in 2 different schools. In our region, it's supported through the REB Foundation, so we're really grateful for their support. Within the Community Foundation, we're working with 2 different high schools in the MERC region and 2 different school divisions that we partner with. And the idea is that we're coordinating with school-based mental health or student wellness teams at these different schools, so existing teams in the schools. They were collecting survey and fidelity data about MTSS and mental health, and we're going to show you what that looks like here in just a second. And then we provide these data dashboards to help inform action planning with the VTSS coaches. So the data helps inform the action planning and the coaching sessions after that. And then following up, we do focus groups and more data collection to help inform progress. So we're showing this data all along the way. And we're going to show what this model looks like and give a demonstration of these dashboards. I do want to say if this is something that sounds like it's of interest to you, please reach out. We'd love to have more conversations about what this might look like in your school division. There are 2 different dashboards that we're going to be playing around with here in just a minute. These are the tiny URLs. You don't have to worry about seeing those right now because I'm going to give a demonstration and then pull them back up. These are also linked in the resource document so you can have access to it. But the two dashboards are, the first one's the tiered fidelity inventory and the mental wellness tool. So Kris was talking about how it's really important at an evaluation level to understand fidelity of implementation. The VTSS coaches go through this tiered fidelity inventory, and they created a whole separate mental wellness companion tool to go along with it because it wasn't capturing mental wellness specifically. And they sit down with each of the different schools and actually complete these. And then the mental health survey data that Chin-Chih shared, we do that same survey in the schools where we're doing this pilot project and ask their faculty and staff about how prepared they feel. So let's take a look at these dashboards, and you're going to get a chance to play around with these yourselves. So first, this is the tiered fidelity inventory and mental wellness tool dashboard. It's going to start running here. In case you're interested, whenever you click in on this, you'll get access to the actual tiered fidelity inventory if you want to take a look, as well as the mental wellness tool that VTSS created. This is all data from an example high school, so this is made up data, but it's supposed to reflect pretty similarly to what we would see in some of these schools. The scoring criteria for everything is on a scale of 0 to 2, 0 being not implemented, 1 being partially implemented, and 2 being fully implemented. And in the dashboard, it's broken down by tiers, where it's tier 1 versus 30 total maximum points. You'll see the TFI score, which is overall how are things going with the tiered fidelity inventory, and then MWT is specifically related to mental wellness. So it's 30, 26, and 34 maximum points. And then on each of these pages, it'll give the definition of what we mean at each tier. And then if you scroll down, it's going to show you a bar chart on the side where it's, okay, the maximum score for tier 1 is 30. That's true for both the TFI score and the mental wellness tool score. And then over here on the right, it's going to show the actual scores and the percentage of total of how high it could go. And then when you scroll down, it'll show the different items, the feature numbers, the subscales, and the different features. It'll show the TFI score, the mental wellness tool score, and the difference between them. So you can click and organize these to see where the biggest differences are. And you can even filter these by different subscales of like teams, of implementation, and evaluation. So this is just kind of trying to break down at each tier, what does this actually look like in terms of mental wellness support at the schools. So being able to break this down and really kind of get granular with it and being able to click and access this, and you can reset it at any time. And then the same thing's true for tier 2 and tier 3. You're able to dig into this data and see at this example high school, where does it seem like there's the most and least fidelity? What's going well, and what are some of the opportunities for improvement, especially what are some of the potential quick wins? And so this is what the tiered fidelity inventory and mental wellness tool dashboard looks like. And then the second dashboard that you can play around with is the faculty and staff capacity to support student mental health. So this shows how prepared faculty and staff are to support student mental health needs. Again, this is all made up data, but it's supposed to align pretty closely to what we might see. So the survey uses a 6-point scale from completely disagree to completely agree. We don't provide a neutral option. We make people say in one direction or the other, but they could say if they don't know. And then it breaks down by the 6 different dimensions of mental health knowledge, training and confidence, MTSS for mental health support, positive mental health culture, policies and practices supporting mental health, and then sense of responsibility and impact. And on each of those pages, you can click and see, it'll give you a bar chart at the top. If it's in the green, it means it's within the agreement area. It gives a definition at the top as well. And then down in the red, it'll show what the actual disagree is. So there's the agree, this is in disagree. And then when it goes down, you can see here's the overall mean, but it'll actually show the specific items that are related to it as well. And that allows you to get more granular. So if you're a school that's looking at this data, you can see, okay, these are some of the things that are going well, and these are some of the opportunities for improvement. So same here, this is what the MTSS page looks like. We can go down and see, okay, what does this look like in terms of agreement and disagreement, what the overall score is on a scale of 1 to 6, and then going in and actually seeing the specific items. And then again, responsibility and impact tends to be a little bit higher for these, where people tend to feel a sense of responsibility and impact, but don't always feel like they're prepared to actually meet those mental health needs, particularly through MTSS. So those are just kind of a quick run through of what those dashboards are. We're going to give you a chance to actually play around with these for a minute. So these are the tiny URLs, but you can also access this in the resource document. What we're going to do is, if you can go into these dashboards, go into one or both of them, and then we're going to take about 10 minutes so you can have a break from listening to us and play around in the dashboard. And as you're looking through this, for this example school, what would you identify as the strengths of this example high school in leveraging MTSS for mental health support? And then what are some of the opportunities for quick wins? And as you're going through, if you can just share your thoughts in the chat. And it's 4:07 right now. We'll come back together at 4:15 to talk about the next piece, but want to give you a chance to play around with these dashboards and share some of your thoughts. So please play around, throw your thoughts in the chat, and we'll come back together at 4:15.
And personal coping skills, self-awareness, the ability to ask for help. These are foundational things that we want all students to know. And a strong foundation can still crack under the right pressure. So think of a student who's resilient by nature, but has no trust at all at the school that they can confide in. Think about some of those students. So now we'll look into the organizational conditions, which these are things that we do have some control over, right? Our school climate, our leadership, our access to support. So if kids can get access to their school counselors, social workers, or psychologists, teachers' awareness about mental health, that's really important. These things all shape how students experience school. And if these systems are not in place, even a resilient student, again, is going to face those barriers. And then finally, when we look outside at those systemic conditions, those tend to be some of the things we don't have as much control over. But these are things like access to healthcare, community resources, and school policies. And those are, again, those things that shape everything underneath. So this is where we have the least control, as I said, yet these systems shape everything else, and really understanding those layers helps us be the advocates for the right partnerships in our schools and communities, the right policies, and making sure that we're working with our VDOE, people like that. We see some of them here today. Okay, and I'm going to go into now Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model. So if any of you know him and nerd out like I do, I love this model. So does David, so does the rest of the team. So we just talked about where you can make an impact in schools, and that mental health isn't just shaped by schools alone. It doesn't exist in that vacuum. But if we truly want to understand why students struggle or succeed, then we have to really be able to look at this full picture here. And this is where Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model comes into play for us. And it really helps us show how all these layers are going to interact to shape a student's mental health. So you see right here, this is the student. And at the individual level, a student may be working on, like I said earlier, coping skills or mindfulness or therapy. At their micro level are the people that they interact with daily. So our family, our peers, our teachers. And if these supports aren't strong, then that student has a better chance. If they are strong, they're going to have a better chance of maintaining their anxiety. If they're weak, that they might feel isolated and not have the chance to do that. And then at our mesosystem, that looks at how different parts of the student's world are interacting. So are teachers working with the families? Are the school counselors working with community-based mental health supports that a student might have? Do peers reinforce coping strategies for their friends, or do they increase stress for their friends? And when these connections are really strong, students are going to get better support. But if communication is lacking, students could fall through the cracks. And then we have our exosystem, and we look at things that affect a student, even if they are not directly involved. So are parents stressed in any way? Did a parent lose their job? And that might not directly impact the student, but it's impacting the parent, which therefore can impact the student. Does the school prioritize mental health programs? Are counselors at the schools overworked and not available to all the kids? It's hard for them to get access to them. And what are some of the messages that our kiddos are seeing in the media about mental health? So students do not directly control these, but they shape those resources and supports. And you can see here the macro system. It's that larger set of social and cultural values that shape our mental health. So when we talk about that, that's like, does the student feel safe talking about anxiety? Is it viewed as a weakness? Do people say, hey, I had that too, I got over it? Does their family have insurance to support their needs so that they can get the help they need? And is mental health stigmatized in their culture? Is that something that you just don't talk about? So really making sure that we're looking at that and knowing what's going on in that macro system. And then finally, we have the chrono system, which can change over time. And this shows up with mental health. For example, we all have different experiences, right? We all went through, David talked about COVID-19. We all went through that, but we all experienced it in different ways. So this layer really does remind us that mental health evolves based on those experiences and systemic changes that we go through. And now I can just walk you through a student, which we have here. Sam struggles with anxiety. And that's usually where it could stop sometimes, right? Could be Sam struggles with anxiety, stop. But we don't want it to stop. So at home, Sam's family doesn't really recognize the signs. In the school, some teachers are strict about leaving class. So families not recognizing these signs, teachers might be strict. Her immediate world isn't catching up to her, right? So that the meso system, Sam's teachers and school counselors have talked about her anxiety, but without the family. So the people who should be coordinating are not. And then at the exosystem, Sam's mom just started a new job. She's working long hours. She's not always available for those after school conversations that Sam might need with her to tell her what she's feeling anxious about. The school division that Sam goes to is cut funding. So the counseling office is super overwhelmed. And her peers are celebrating their successes on social media, which is giving her more anxiety. Okay, so that's the ecosystem, and it forces Sam to see things that she is feeling about that. And then finally, our macro system, school board policies have changed around attendance policies and their consequences. And one of the things that happens with Sam when she has anxiety is she doesn't often want to come to school. So she feels even more defeated about missing school, and then she's going to get in trouble. So the system is punishing her for struggling. And then finally, the last one is the chrono system. She is an adolescent, and it's a time of major identity formation and social comparison. And additionally, the school went virtual during the pandemic, so that created some things as well. So the timing made everything a lot harder for her. And now I'm going to pass it over to Anna.
Thank you, Kim.
She'll take over.
Thank you. And if you're just joining us, we did put the resource document into the chat box where you can quickly catch up on the slides and other resources. We can put it back in there. Just let us know through the chat. But, let's just all take a deep breath right now. It's 4:23. We've been at this for a while. So if you'll just take a deep breath in and release that. If you're near a window, just take a peek out. I see lots of green trees. My neighbor's mowing his lawn. So just center yourself as we prepare to spend time, boots on the ground. What does this look like? I cannot wait for you to hear from Dr. Williams. But taking a look at this ecological level, MTSS, the connection, and the mental health example, integrating the model with MTSS, and David, you can just click through those. Think about how this moves us, as Kim shared, the students in our office, and we're individualizing the care within that microsystem. But think about it being more system-centered wellness model by viewing the student as part of all the things you see here in a nested ecosystem. We can then begin to think broader, address the barriers at the source rather than just managing the symptoms day to day for the student. So MTSS is our framework for providing that support. But the ecological model helps us ensure that we are looking at the entire environment that's influencing the student. And you see some examples here. We are going to do a demonstration, and you're going to have time to interact with a similar resource in a breakout room later. So now we're going to hear from one of our MERC divisions, Henrico, Dr. Shenita Williams. She is going to share first how school-based mental health supports are integrated within MTSS. Then she's going to walk us through a story that illustrates the ecological model. And while she tells her story, Dr. Dupre will take notes on the resource document that you're going to interact with. So we're kind of doing an I do with you, a demonstration of that resource. And then you'll have an opportunity to interact with the resource in the breakout room. So Dr. Williams. And Kim, we were going to look more at those are our notes, but we are going to look more at the form.
I'm sorry, I thought I was sharing screen one.
That's not a problem at
Quite all right.
all. And I know Dr. Williams, before I start interviewing her, would like to introduce herself. That's it. You got it, sister.
Good afternoon, everyone. The good part. I am Dr. Shenita Williams, and I am the social work coordinator at Henrico County Public Schools. Glad to be with you all. I have been a school social worker for, as David said, over 25 years at this point. And so I'm glad to be with you all to talk through the mental health, student mental health, which is one of my areas of expertise, and systems of support through the lens of an ecological model. So yes, thank y'all for having me today.
So glad you're here. So Dr. Williams, could you elaborate on your division's strategic approach to integrating school-based mental health supports within the multi-tiered system of supports?
Absolutely. So two things that I'll just highlight is when we think about this idea of school mental health and MTSS integration, in Henrico, there is a focus on multi-tiered systems of support being used in or within every department, regardless of what that department is. So, for example, our alternative programs and engagement, our family and community engagement, school quality, teaching and learning, that this is a key focus. And what our excellent MTSS team has found is that many of these departments are the work that they're doing, they're already, I guess, structuring, or their interventions are present and they're tiered, but they may not be using the same language. So the MTSS team is working with the departments to help support them with organization, helping with, thinking about criteria, thinking through thresholds as it relates to how they set their intervention. So I think that is a huge bonus. Wanted to highlight that. The other thing is thinking about a key strategy that focuses on this integration is having a clear understanding that this work is grounded in foundational aspects. So things that are key before you can even talk about integration of these two concepts, right? And I won't go through them all. I'll highlight four. One is the recognition of the need for youth or student, right? Family, school, and community collaboration. This is the heart, right? This is where all of these thoughts and ideas that we have as a division come together for students and their families and communities. The other foundational aspect that's critical, and we've talked about this, is database decision making, how we are determining the needs and supports for students. Promotion and support of positive school culture and climate. I imagine that for everyone on the call, culture and climate is something that stays at the forefront, and making sure that we are doing our due diligence and promoting and supporting that. And then lastly, just ongoing work. And we're focused on that as it relates to staff mental health attitudes, competencies, and wellness. And so having a solid foundation is key in long-term sustainability when we talk about integrating student mental health with the tier systems of support. So
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And I loved how you talked about it being is continuous, right?
Yeah,
It's long term,
absolutely.
it's continuous. So if you're here today as a division just starting out with some of these core components or key concepts, as Kris talked about, it's a phased approach.
Yeah.
You do want to take your time, and you do want to, if you've been doing this for years, also you want to make sure that you're progress monitoring. It sounds like you're doing all those good things. So our next question, reflecting on the content presented this afternoon regarding Brofenbrenner's ecological model, and Kim has the sheet up. She's going to be taking notes. Could you elaborate on your division's methodology for ensuring that all interconnected systems are comprehensively addressed when collaborating with students or staff, families, and community partners? Tell us, what are you doing well?
Yeah. First, this is a great question because for all of my practitioners that are on the call, this really is where research, and I love me some research and data, but this is really where research, data, and theory meet practice. And it's like, yes, you all have shared all this great stuff with me, and what does that look like? Right? Boots on the ground. And so I do want to talk about I'll share with you all a specific case that a social worker worked through. But before I do that, I want to first talk about the microsystem level, thinking about this ecological model and how what it looks like in Henrico. And so for all, right, there's a focus on relationship building, mental health and wellness education, because that is key, resiliency, and the use of a trauma-informed approach. So an example at this microsystem level for our elementary school students, they follow the LAMP model. So library, art, music, and PE. So SEL, social emotional lesson is part of their curriculum. It's embedded. And so that, like, I'm like, how cool is that, right? Because the little ones will carry that with them, middle school and high school. And then even at the secondary level, which, they're not babies anymore. However, at the secondary level, there are things that you can do to be intentional about how we offer social emotional support at that level. So for example, one of the schools, the first 15 minutes of their day, it's a check-in. And that is intentionally designed to help students ground them for the day to come. That's going to be, that's the day that's coming before them, but also for the teacher to be able to do this quick check-in. This like,
Mhm.
uh-oh, wait a minute. Anna might need a little bit of support, as the day
She
goes on.
usually does.
So it becomes this opportunity to do that. And it's small, right? And so
Mhm.
small but mighty and meaningful. Now, that would be at the microsystem level. So I'll just share with you all this case. Um, and I'll use the case to talk through the rest of the levels for the ecological model. This particular student, two-parent home, male high school student, education is highly valued. The family focused on wanting this young man to obtain a high school diploma. And the family experienced a significant tragedy, the loss of a child, the loss of this young man's sibling. And so this where this the school where this student started, I'll say school A. School A, um, this student came on the radar because he stopped attending school. So the social worker became involved and quickly learned of this tragedy and begin to say this might not be the best school given the nature of the tragedy that occurred for this family. And so immediately there was this, I call it like this collaboration. We often talk about collaboration within schools, but then across schools within the division. So the social worker contacted another social worker at we'll call school B and was able to say, hey, I have a student, he has these set of needs. I think this student will perform better at your school. And so immediately the social worker and the receiving school begin to collaborate with their administrative team and including the school counselors to make sure that they were prepared to receive the student and to assess what supports they could immediately put into place. But it didn't stop there. So we got the social worker to social work collaboration within the division, with across schools, within schools in terms of administrators, counselors, social worker, but it was the family piece. The family piece. There was contact made with the parent before the transition began and throughout that process. And then once the student actually arrived at the new school, the mom was very intimately involved and was, a critical piece that helped further assess the student's needs. So I thought that was just like amazing because sometimes, we don't always push hard enough to get family support, or we don't think about including the family and support. So,
And
um,
would you say that would be the meso system then, the work that you did outside of just knowing the story and the
yes,
okay,
yes,
so all of that was really like what Kim talked about, connecting the microsystem, the individual student to all those wonderful things that you shared.
yes.
Okay.
Thinking about that interconnection,
Mm-hmm.
connectedness between those. Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay.
And
Thank you.
so at the exosystem level, where we're thinking about systems having an impact that can be indirect, indirectly affecting students, or having an impact and influence on their lives. The social worker assessed, assessment being ongoing, that the
Mhm.
needs of the student were far greater than what the school could provide. And that does happen, right? We
Yes.
encounter students that have greater needs than what we are able to fully support. And so in Henrico, we use Care Solace and we have Hazel Health. And so Hazel Health is for our high school students to be able to access services. Care Solace is available. I think of it basically as a way for to refer and help parents with vetting particular needs as it relates to the issue at hand. And so the social worker did that and also utilized Henrico Mental Health, which is our community service board. And the thing that was important about assessing what was in the community as far as resources at this level was the student was able to get an extension of support through Henrico Mental Health, but because we remained connected and involved with the family, the mother was also able to get help, right? So now we
Oh,
have
yeah.
this connection of not just the student that we're working with, but this extension because we know families are extension of their students and the community is an extension of our families, right? And so that was really I was pleased to hear that that took place. And so the social worker and I talked through, well, what did that look like from a macro system standpoint? What were some system-wide influences that were at play? And the social worker really felt that within the building and also within the division, that there's this ongoing work to create a culture of acceptance and understanding of mental health and wellness for students and
Mm.
staff. And I think that's the key piece. It's that the education, not just for students, but the staff that are serving and supporting students. And then from the chrono system, that time and change across, it was really thinking about how does this young person be successful in an academic setting given what they had experienced. And so we know that grief and loss, you know, can be long
Mhm.
and cyclical. And then, so that's the one piece, and those the implications from that for the student, but also the transition and change from one school to the next, right? And the transitions that just occur by virtue of the loss that the family had experienced. I will say that this was a complex case, a sad case, and the intention of the social worker to make sure that that collaboration at the meso level was happening. This young person went on to get his GED. So at the
Oh,
end of the
wow.
day, it was a win.
Yes.
It was really a win. Um, and so. I just wanted to I wanted to share that as a positive.
Yes, yes, such a positive. And a great segue to my last question for you. As you think about this case,
Yeah.
a lot of things to celebrate, but even in celebrations, we need to stop and say, what are opportunities to
Yeah.
improve? And from that, what are some quick wins
Yeah.
for us to make improvements?
I'll talk in a broad sense. Um, because while it applies to the case that I shared, I think it's bigger than just that one case. When I think about opportunities for improvement at the microsystem level, it's keeping the momentum going, right? It's that, we start the school year off with a bang. We're big, right? We're like mental health and here's all the things. And then school life, as they say, school life be lifing, right? And then
Mhm.
it can be hard to maintain the momentum of making sure that we are still present for for that tier one, for that microsystem. At the mesosystem, ongoing collaboration. In this particular, the particular case that I shared, one of the things that the social worker and I reflected on was there weren't any inherent touch points there weren't any touch points that were intentionally set. So entering into a situation like this where you're doing a lot of collaboration, it'd be nice to develop a plan for when are we making sure that we are touching base with the parent, with community service board or whomever you're collaborating with. The other thing would be continuous assessment of the opportunities available in the community, making sure that is there a provider that's closer? Is there a provider that's, much more, I don't know, culturally appropriate? Whatever the
Mhm.
case may be, but making sure that we're continuously assessing for collaborative opportunities. And then at the macro system, thinking about revisiting and reviewing for Henrico those foundational aspects, right? For division-wide support of mental health through a tiered systems approach, making sure that we are staying true to those foundational aspects, the things that you have to have before um, the other things can occur. Quick wins, I'll just say two things really and this is for the folks on the call, right? When you're thinking
Mhm.
about how do we do this work, what would be some low-hanging fruit? Two things that come to mind that were quick wins for us that can be quick wins for you as well is thinking about your current staff, right? Thinking about and thinking about capitalizing on staff knowledge and expertise because you have folks in the building who are able to provide supports. Social workers, counselors, your licensed staff, and also accessibility to services. That's a quick win. Making sure that you have a pathway that students
Yes, so
have and families
important.
have a pathway to access the services. If you don't have that plan, then all the supports that you have in place, they're not going to be reachable for the family. So those are the quick wins that I have to share.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I think that speaks to the meso system and the extra mile that the school social worker and your division went to make sure they had pathways to accessibility. So thank you for that. And I'm going to pass it to David.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Shenita, for
Mhm.
talking through all of that together. It's really helpful. We want to give everybody a chance to think about what this looks like in your work. And so I'm sharing my screen with a resource document here. If you'll scroll down to the Bronfenbrenner MTSS activity, if you want to take a look at the worksheet that Kim just filled out during that conversation, it's linked here. So you can see that as an example. It's a view-only access, but you could see that as an example. What we'd like for you to do is to click on the second one, which is the same worksheet, but it's going to make an individual copy for you. So it's going to come up blank. It'll look like this copy of ecological systems model. And we're going to go into breakout rooms. And as we're having a conversation about this, maybe start jotting down some ideas of what this looks like in your work, or maybe in your school division, or if you're doing any research related to MTSS and mental health. What are some of your thoughts about some of your partners and how you you guys are engaging in this work. But we're going to have a conversation in some breakout rooms, and each of the people who are helping to facilitate this seminar are going to be in the different breakout rooms. And as we talk through this, maybe you want to go through each of these levels, but we have about 12 minutes or so. Maybe you want to just focus on one or two of these levels and have some conversations around what do you notice that's like some of the challenges related to this, but also some resources in there. And as we're talking, the people who are facilitating the breakout rooms are also going to be taking some notes about what are some of the strategies or resources that people share. And this is going to live on after our seminar has finished, and we'll include this link with the video so people can have access to these resources and strategies that people share afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to open the breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are going to be open for about 12 minutes, and then we're going to come back together at the end just for a couple of minutes so I can talk through what our plan is moving forward and some of the follow-up communication you can expect from us. So I'm going to go and open these rooms, and we'll see you back in about 12 minutes.